King Arthur and His Knights by Elizabeth Lodor Merchant. Continuing Lancelot of the Lake. The poor distracted queen ran up and down the banks of the lake, wringing her hands as she called out her baby's name. As she wept and called, the faithful servant came hurrying down the side of the mountain. He too was sobbing. He said that wicked King Claudius had set fire to the castle, which was blazing away into ruins, and that King Bon was lying at the top of the hill, dead with grief. Then the queen dried her eyes and folded her hands and spoke calmly. "My husband has gone. My baby has gone. My home has gone," she said. "There is nothing left for me to live for. I may as well die too." But even as she said this, the abbess of a convent not far away came walking, and wrapped in her cloak along the banks of the lake. She was a good and sweet woman, and she knew all about the fairy in the silver robes, with white hands and golden hair, who lived under the water. She heard the queen's sad words and coming up to her, she spoke consolingly. "Poor queen," she said, "for indeed I know you are a queen. Be comforted. You have not lost so much as you think you have. Your little baby is in hands far safer than those of any human nurse. For your husband, the king, be content. He is at peace. For yourself, there is a home waiting in the convent there, among the trees. Dry your tears and come with me." The abbess spoke so gently and so firmly that somehow a strange feeling of consolation came over the poor queen. She went to the convent with this good woman, and found it was a beautiful and restful place. The abbess comforted her by telling her over and over that the baby was indeed in the very best of hands. So by and by the queen, who was tired of wars and troubles, settled down into contentment, although she never forgot her lost baby, and stayed with the good abbess in the peaceful convent until she died. But what had happened to the baby? The beautiful fairy dived down, 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 carrying little Lancelot in her arms. As she dived, her silver gown mingled with the silver ripples, and the shells and the forget-me-nots floated away from her golden hair. Then, far below her appeared the roofs and towers of an enchanted city, and now the water turned into a cloudy mist, and her robes spread out into glittering wings. She was no longer diving, but floating on the misty air. Softly, very softly, she floated downwards till the bright streets and flowery gardens and the marble walls of an enchanted city showed quite clearly beneath. Then she stretched out her little white feet and alighted on the very tips of her toes, all among the tall green grass and fairy buttercups and daisies, and from every side beautiful ladies came running up to her, exclaiming and shouting and clapping their hands. They were, every one of them, fairies of the lake, and they were so pleased to have among them a little human baby that they did not know what to do. Tiny Lancelot had been sleeping all this time, and because he was in the arms of a water fairy, had not been able to breathe quite comfortably all the way down through the lake. Now he woke up and smiled at the pretty ladies clustering around him. When he smiled, they all cried out with greater delight than ever that his eyes were just as their own forget-me-nots. They kissed him and hugged him, and took off his little prince's clothes, and dressed him up in silvery gossamers, just as they were dressed themselves. Then they took him into one of the enchanted houses, and gave him a wonderful nursery all to himself, where he had fishes to play with him all day long, and he was so merry and healthy that they called him the beautiful foundling, or sometimes the happy child. But the fairy lady who had brought him there, and who was the queen of them all, never called him by either of those names. She had but one title for him, that she always used, and Her voice was very gentle when she spoke it. This title was Son of a King, because you see, she knew that he was of royal human blood, and that some day he must go back to the world from fairyland and play his part as a prince among his fellow men. And how Lancelot of the Lake went back to the world from the enchanted city under the water, you shall hear in another story. Now, if somebody dies and they are going to have a good afterlife, it's the best thing for them. You're not mourning for them, you're mourning for themselves, for yourself. And if somebody dies and they're going to have a bad afterlife, it's good for you that they have passed. Now, people naturally mourn the death of family, friends, even others. And this is fine. But control one's actions and master one's beliefs in regards to this.